Greetings again everyone, it's time for another camera review thing. This time a bit of a star Canon camera that's been around for a while now, the full frame 24 megapixel Canon EOS R6 Mark II. I tested its lower budget cousin, the EOS R8, a while ago, which is one of the best value low budget cameras in the world today in terms of picture and video quality, although it omits quite a few professional features that more serious photographers are looking for. Well, the R6 Mark II fixes all of that for a price. Its official price is £2,800 or $2,500 US, but at the time of writing it's discounted everywhere to £2,000 or $2,000. But is it still competitive enough for that sort of price? Let's find out, and I'd like to thank Canon UK very much for loaning me this camera for a couple of weeks for evaluation, although as usual this is a totally independent review. This camera is popular and well respected, quite a big upgrade from the original 20 megapixel R6 Mark I. The increase in resolution to 24 megapixels isn't gigantic, but from a marketing perspective it certainly sounds way better. It's designed to be a star hybrid camera in Canon's lineup. Equally at home with both stills and video work, lower resolution than its older 45 megapixel EOS R5 camera, but lower priced as well, and with a slightly faster and more modern autofocus system. Its main benefits over the cheaper R8 camera are that it takes Canon's heavy-duty batteries instead of middling little ones, it has two SD card slots, and it has in-body image stabilization rated up to 8 stops, and a much faster mechanical shutter burst rate of 12 frames per second. With a huge buffer, here it goes, it just keeps shooting and shooting. In electronic shutter mode, it can manage bursts up to 40 frames per second, which is quite ridiculous. Its 24 megapixel sensor already has a great reputation for delivering sharp images with low noise and good dynamic range, not to mention excellent quality 4K video at 60 frames per second in all kinds of codecs, and even up to C-Log 3 for extra dynamic range. And if you plug in an external recorder, 6K RAW video at up to 60 frames per second. Although for 6K RAW at 60 frames per second, you'll need a top-of-the-line external recorder like the Atomos Ninja 5 Plus. The normal Ninja 5 won't take you up to 6K at 60 frames per second. Still great to know for any more professional video makers. Still shooters will be happy to see it can shoot exposures up to 1/8000th of a second as 10-bit HDR, PQ, HEIF images, or normal JPEGs of course, as well as compressed and normal RAW shooting modes, and it has anti-flicker shooting and silent electronic shooting too. I also got good results from its in-camera HDR shooting mode, although it's rather a basic one. The camera's excellent autofocus system is top of the range from Canon thanks to its very powerful Digic X processor inside. Its autofocus is very fast with the usual array of subject recognition modes that Canon's high-end cameras all enjoy, both recognizing and tracking your subjects fantastically well. Anyone upgrading from their older Canon camera will not want to go back. The autofocus settings are highly adjustable, and even shooting birds in flight, you can get some good accuracy, although it's not a miracle maker. You'll obviously still get plenty of missed shots in there too. The facial recognition autofocus is ridiculously good though, incredibly quick and sticky to your subject. When it comes to build quality, the camera itself is medium-sized, so not so big and heavy that it's a pain to carry around with you, but not so touchy that someone with big stupid farmer's hands like mine will find it too fiddly to handle. It's handsome and fits beautifully in your hand, and its control layout will be instantly familiar to anyone who's used almost any serious Canon camera over the past 10 years or so. Everything's very well refined, although I do wish Canon would make a decision on what kind of on-off switches and still video switches they're going to use. It seems to change with every new camera. It might also have been nice to have a locking switch on the main mode dial to prevent accidental changes, but it's not a big deal. We also get an autofocus control joystick here, and the all-important AF on button too, of course. On the sides of the camera we get a microphone input and headphone socket, very useful for video work. We also get micro HDMI and USB-C ports. I can't wait for Canon to grow out of using micro HDMI ports on their professional cameras though. As I mentioned a moment ago, the camera also has dual SD card slots, incredibly helpful for professional photographers who need some peace of mind. There's no pop-up flash, but the hot shoe is multi-function, so with the right adapter you can get XLR inputs on there for 4-channel audio capture. The fully articulated touchscreen is very responsive and intuitive to use, bright and very high resolution with accurate colours. The electronic viewfinder is big, bright and fast, one of Canon's top-tier offerings. The camera uses Canon's legendary LP-E6NG batteries, only enough for about 500 to 600 shots or so, but that's still good enough for a modern professional mirrorless camera. Overall, this camera is very well featured, handles beautifully for video and stills work, has a lot of Canon's best professional features, fast and reliable autofocus and fast shooting speeds. Honestly, it's a real pleasure to use, which is just as well considering its price. Alright, let's take a look at its still image quality now. This camera has Canon's latest 24 megapixel full frame sensor, which has quickly gained a great reputation for itself. As you can see here, its raw images capture tons of fine detail with all the usual nice Canon colours you come to expect. Impressively, the camera's JPEG images are almost as sharp, which used to be a weak point of older Canon cameras. This is definitely Canon's sharpest 24 megapixel sensor ever. Let's look at noise levels now. It's only really at ISO 1600 that even slight noise and loss of detail is becoming visible, which is a wonderful performance really. Let's push things a little further though. At ISO 3200, everything's still looking pretty good. It's only really at ISO 6400 that we are really beginning to lose detail. ISO 12800 is usable at a pinch, but any higher than that, especially 51200, and things really begin to fall apart. Still though, this is some of the best high ISO image quality I've seen, to be honest, with even ISO 6400 retaining good detail and acceptable noise levels, so great job Canon, this is some of the best image quality you can get out of a 24 megapixel camera, full stop. Something else that's good to see is the camera's quite good dynamic range. This is where you'll see one of the biggest improvements over a camera with a smaller aps-c sensor, with shadows and highlights retaining loads of information here. Here I've pulled the picture up from almost complete blackness in a raw image. I have seen even better performances than this, for example on a Leica SL3 I recently reviewed, which was out of this world, but it's still a decent enough showing. Let's take a look at video quality now. I have to apologise here. Due to a technical issue with my external recorder, I'm not able to show you 6K footage this time, but I'm working on that for the future. I'll be showing you results shot at 4K and 60 frames per second. At ISO 100, the video quality is excellent, really detailed with no noise or difficult artifacts. This is great stuff. The quality remains very good up to ISO 3200, although obviously a bit of noise is still emerging. Still, what a performance! It's at ISO 6400 that we're losing detail and getting some really noticeable noise. ISO 12800 is rough, but still just about usable. Still, this video footage is very detailed with very low noise, even at high ISO levels, a bit of a dream come true for any video maker. I would show you the results at 25 frames per second, but impressively, for the 60p footage, they are basically the same, so you can happily shoot away at 60 frames per second here if you want to, with no fear of decreased image quality. When it comes to rolling shutter, when shooting in 4K at either 60 or 25p, it is noticeable, but not completely disastrous. I've certainly seen worse than this before. As is often the case, reduce the quality to 1080p for much better results if you're shooting an action scene, for example. The camera also offers a high-speed shooting mode, either 120 frames per second or 180 frames per second, all at 1080p. At 120 frames per second, the footage looks okay. If you look at my messy hair there, you'll see it's not the highest resolution. Strangely, footage shot at 180 frames per second looks considerably better, much sharper. So if you want slow motion, just go the whole hog and shoot at 180. As I mentioned earlier, the camera has in-body image stabilization, and if you're shooting video, this can be supplemented with electronic stabilization. Here's some vlogging footage without any stabilization at all. Here it is with just the in-body sensor stabilization. As you can see, there's no crop in the video footage, and it's a little smoother, but there's still lots of shaking and corner warping. Here's some footage with electronic stabilization added as well. It helps, but also it's now cropping in. And finally, enhanced electronic stabilization. This crops into the footage the most, and the footage is quite alright there, but there are some sudden jerks to it as you walk along. And that's it for my test. Well, overall, the R6 Mark II really does just speak for itself in that it is an excellent performer in virtually every aspect. Well, if you're satisfied with a 24 megapixel sensor, that is. There's very little for me to complain about here, but the camera is nearly 2 years old now, and the competition is already nipping at its heels. Sony and Nikon are now producing cameras with faster sensors, enabling better performance and lower rolling shutter effects. Also, other 24 megapixel cameras are starting to be able to record 6K and even 6K RAW footage internally nowadays, not just an external recorder. So that should be the next step for Canon here, as well as perhaps a few small updates to the autofocus system. But overall, the camera is just so powerful, packed with professional features, yet so simple and enjoyable to use, and that's a real strength of Canon equipment in general, finding that happy place between sheer power and comfortable fun. If it's still discounted to $2,000 by the time you read this review, then the R6 Mark II certainly comes highly recommended. Thanks for watching everyone. I love putting these videos together, although they're pretty time consuming, especially when I review a whole camera and not just a lens. So I want to say a big thank you to all my Patreon supporters for your support, which keeps this channel trucking on. Patreon supporters get all kinds of bonus and exclusive content, not to mention early access to some of my most interesting reviews, so check it out in the description below. Ciao for now, everyone.